The 2019 season was certifiably insane. Not only was the all-time home run record set, it blew past the previous record set only 2 years earlier by over 600 home runs. Just think about that for a second. At 2017's rate, they'd have to play an additional 536 games to reach 2019's total. 536 extra games. That's 17 additional games per team. As early as April 5th, writers started to notice the uptick in homers, and it only got crazier from there. 15 teams set a franchise record. Studies were conducted in order to determine what the hell was going on with the baseball. While those studies, both conducted internally by MLB and by independent journalists alike, concluded that the 2019 ball did in fact have less drag, which you will remember from my Rockies video, please check that out if you haven't already, meant the ball essentially carried in the air more. They couldn't determine why exactly. According to Major League Baseball, the manufacturing process hadn't changed. Tampering or not, the reality is that an unprecedented amount of homers were hit in 2019. As we just discussed, 600 more than the previous record in 2017, and over 1,200 more than the third highest in 2000, the peak of the steroid era. I want to compare 2019 to 2000 specifically though, because the distribution of where the homers came from looked a lot different. As a fan, the issue I had with the 2019 home run boom was the rise of the middle class. Now don't get me wrong, I love the middle class, but when looking at the 2000 home run distribution, we see a clear difference between the haves and have-nots. Obviously, there were a few substances that helped create that distinction. In 2019, we saw a lot more players floating around the 25 to 39 and 15 to 24 homer ranges. Players who in years past we consider as contact-oriented are now putting up numbers we'd expect from old-school sluggers like Jermaine Dye and Mark McGwire, and their inflated numbers had a way of overshadowing the actual sluggers that year. Essentially, the luster of Mike Trout's 45 homers is worn out when a guy like Danny Santana can hit 28. In 2019, we lost the variety in player archetypes that we were used to seeing in years past. To quote one of my favorite villains, when everyone's super, no one will be. And believe it or not, this caused some serious fallout. Many fans, myself included, dismissed the 2020 season as an aberration in the game's delicate balance, and as a result, tend to shrug off players' performances that year. But many of us look at and still legitimize a season that may soon be reflected upon as an even bigger anomaly. Many players ended up trying to play into what they believed would be the new normal, and suffered when the balls returned to their pre-2016 form, which resulted in seasons like 2022 that saw a huge decrease in league offensive output. Many players were rewarded with contracts that maybe didn't truly reflect who they actually were talent-wise. Fans balked when guys who put up huge numbers in 2019 fell down a cliff performance-wise in subsequent years. So in this video, I want to see who were the biggest frauds of the 2019 juiced ball season. I'm going to use my third grade knowledge of advanced analytics to determine whose seasons were the biggest mirages of power. So maybe we can have a way of sorting through the glut of home run hitters that year. Disclaimer, I am just a humble touring musician turned baseball YouTuber who gets bored easily. This isn't a peer-reviewed study, I'm no data scientist, I just like asking myself these questions, then using the straightest possible path to answer them. Use this video to win an argument with your friends during your weekly Applebee's crawl, but don't try to claim that this is the definitive answer to the question of who was the biggest juiced ball fraud of 2019. Hey, you!
Me?
Yes, you! You remember when fantasy sports used to be fun and enjoyable? Back in the days when it was just you and your buds, or a group of strangers if you were into that, doing drafts, talking smack, and finding out who the biggest ball knower was?
No. I mean, yes. Yes, I do.
Hi, I'm Z-Level Celebrity No More Fielders, here to tell you about Rival Fantasy. They just dropped their new game, Best Ball, which takes all of your favorite parts about fantasy, such as drafting, trading, and signing, and takes care of all the aspects that has held fantasy baseball back in the past.
Yo, that sounds really fun!
And even better, I'll be using the platform all season, so if you subscribe to me on YouTube or follow me on Twitter, I'll be posting links to daily and weekly drafts, daily challenges, and fantasy bingo. So if you think you can beat me, then I better see you there. And while you're signing up, use code NOMOREFIELDERS to get $25 in vouchers instantly. Again, that's code NOMOREFIELDERS, all lowercase, no spaces, or just use the link in the description. It's right there. I did all that work to place it there for your convenience. If you are in an ineligible state, you can still participate in mock drafts.
Hella sick!
Let's have some fun this season. So with my approach, I wanted to be both expansive and clever. Now, I am mostly using Statcast data, so if that isn't your thing, then I am truly sorry. Trust me, this stuff is actually quite fascinating. First area of business is the home run cutoff. I chose 25. I contemplated going down to 20, but I was worried that players in this range would wind up clogging the list. 25 just seems like the number that raises the flag in your head, which tells you that this player is a home run hitter. Maybe I should have made the cutoff at 22 or something, but at the end of the day, I am a dimwit who likes numbers to be divisible by 5, so 25 it is. First metric I used is barrel rate. I also considered hard hit rate, but hard hit rate, 1, doesn't account for launch angle, 2, doesn't discern the difference between exit velos. Barrel rate is fun in that it understands what the optimal conditions for an extra base hit are. It knows that a ball hit at a 38-degree angle needs to be hit harder than a ball at a 26-degree angle to be worth anything other than a long flyout. Common wisdom will tell you that a player with a low barrel rate shouldn't be hitting too many homers, and if they are, something preposterous is afoot. Next up is average exit velo. There is another metric that we'll get to later that I consider to be a better version of this, but I wanted to include this one as a stabilizer. Typically, sluggers are going to hit the ball harder on average, and I felt these results would be missing something if we didn't include it. Now, I did weigh every metric the same besides this one, so it shouldn't have any demonstrative effects on the results. This next metric was recommended and provided to me by my friend the Diamond. Difference from expected weighted on base average, or xWOBA, to actual weighted on base average, regular WOBA, for fly balls only. This metric takes the WOBA value that is calculated on every fly ball using Statcast metrics to predict what the result should be, and subtracts it by the WOBA of the actual result. For the purposes of this exercise, WOBA is basically on base percentage that understands the value of singles over walks and extra base hits over singles. Bottom line is this metric will tell us who milked lazy fly balls for homers the most in 2019. Next up is exit velocity for the hitter's 50% best struck balls. Look, I get it. We all love average exit velocity, but it doesn't tell us the full story. Truth is, there are a lot of outliers in the bottom half of a player's batted ball profile. This stat eliminates those outliers that we don't really care about and captures what they are actually doing when getting good wood on the ball. This will really show us who the true sluggers are, and who maybe had a few what should have been doubles that turned into garden homers. And last but not least, my personal favorite, difference in 2019 isolated slugging from their career. Now I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of isolated slugging in most circumstances. Basically, all it's doing is subtracting batting average from slugging percentage to understand the percent of extra bases a player is getting out of each hit. It's pretty damn archaic and doesn't really tell us much besides, hey, X player hits a lot more homers than singles. No team is going to go after a guy because they have a high isolated slugging, but it is perfect for the purposes of this exercise. Because looking through some players who set their career high in homers this year, it wasn't their season homer total that stood out, but their 2019 isolated slugging. I wanted to take the difference of their career ISO outside of 2019 and subtract it from their 2019 ISO to find out who the biggest frauds were. Now I do know that taking the difference instead of just using their career ISO means I'm taking a stand and actively punishing players who had a higher isolated slugging in 2019. I take the stand earnestly because we are trying to find the biggest frauds here. The players who milked the juice balls the hardest. The players who were hard. The players who made the most out of the juiced ball. I also quickly want to point out that I did consider using other metrics, most notably outside zone swing percentage times outside zone contact percentage. Intuitively, we understand that balls hit outside of the strike zone don't typically result in homers, which is true, so I wondered if 2019 saw a meaningful increase in percentage of homers hit outside the strike zone. It did not. My thinking was contact hitters figured all they needed to do was lift any ball in the air. Didn't matter if they got a good swing on it or not because everything hit in the air was leaving the park that year. That did not happen. So I scrapped this metric. As always, I'm curious to hear what you would use in this situation. So if you feel I could have used a better metric or process, please comment down below. I also wanted to share with you the 10 biggest juiced ball saviors. The players who proved it didn't really matter how the balls were being made. Honestly, pretty satisfied with this list. It's entirely possible I used biased data analysis, but this truly makes me optimistic for the results ahead. Now, on to the biggest juiced ball frauds. Yankees fans were probably expecting this one, and no surprises, Gleyber Torres greets us at number 10. Many of those same fans will tell you that Torres hitting 38 homers in 2019 was possibly one of the worst things that could happen to his career, as the normally line drive oriented contact hitter believed in his heart that he was actually the next Alex Rodriguez. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. At 22, Gleyber is by far our youngest juiced ball merchant, and you have to feel somewhat bad for him. Well, as bad as you can feel for a professional athlete. He got off to one of the best starts you could ask for from a young player, but it was all a mirage. Fantasy, created by the gods who laughed at both Torres' success and subsequent failure. The metrics that killed him the most were both his average exit velos, even though his barrel rate and ISO difference grayed out as okay. At number 10, Gleyber is one of the more obvious names on this list, but as we'll see, there are a few surprises ahead. Speaking of, Marte is a dark horse candidate on this list. I didn't even consider his name when thinking of who the biggest juice ball frauds could be. But while I was inputting the data, I kept noticing some of his metrics popping out like an eyesore. Marte is a great player, don't get me wrong. But similar to Torres, seeing him break out in 2019's environment gave most of us the wrong idea of what kind of player he was. I believe 2023 was more indicative of his true self. In 2019, he ran some pretty middling barrel rates, while the fly ball difference makes me believe he snuck out a few what in most years would have been long fly outs into garden homers. He's still an amazing player, and his average exit velo for best hit balls, ranking relatively middle of the pack among elite company, shows that his true value lies in spraying hard hit balls all over the field as opposed to muscling them over the fence. You all remember when Max Kepler hit 36 homers in 2019? I mean, I do because I remember this season more vividly than most. But Max Kepler hitting 36? I mean, my god. That's more than Eddie Murray ever hit in a single season. And dude hit 504 over the course of his career. Similar to Marte, his average exit velo for hardest hit balls is still relatively good in this company, which indicates below the surface what kind of player he was always meant to be. But his fly ball difference shows that he got a few extra base hits due to the ball carrying more this season. Like Marte, I still think Kepler is a very good player. In fact, I believe everyone on this list is a good player. Just that 2019 gave us a misleading version of them. It's actually quite strange how eerily similar Kepler's career arc is to Marte's. A few average seasons before taking full advantage of the juiced ball in 2019, followed by a few topsy-turvy years until putting it back together in 2023. A season that is more aligned with the player scouts expected them to be in the first place. I am glad Kepler made this list because I was starting to get real worried that this would just turn into a list of players who had the friendliest ballpark dimensions. But Target Field ranked in the bottom 10 in both Wobicon and home run factor for lefties in 2019, which makes what the Bomba squad did that year even more impressive. Can I get a bat flip? Another that really happened moment. Mark Canha hit 26 homers in 126 games. His previous season high was 17. Like with Kepler, I'm very glad he made the cut to hush up anyone claiming that this is just a list punishing players who played in a stadium with favorable hitting conditions. Again, seeing this after everything we know now is loony. Canha had a 913 OPS this year. His next best in a non-shortened season is 778. Like the others before him, Canha is a very good player, being one of the many secret key performers in order for the A's to win 97 games that year. But a power hitter, he is not. Like Gleyber, I think we all saw this one coming. Also, I was called out for not mentioning Escobar's Fogo power and replacing Wright. So there you go. Eduardo Escobar has Fogo power. More like faux power though, am I right? Because it was all an illusion. His top half exit velo was absolutely terrible. In fact, it ranked dead last out of all players in the dataset. His barrel rate was also poor, along with his fly ball difference. This is all to say that Escobar is just not built like a power hitter. As much as we like to tell ourselves that out of all major sports, baseball is the least based on pure physical makeup, it does matter when it comes to player archetypes. In fact, Escobar hit the third most homers for a guy his height or shorter in the 21st century up to that point. At 5'10", he is the second shortest player on this list. But he's not the shortest. That honor would go to our garden gnome, Jose Altuve. His inclusion is the most surprising to me. He took quite the unique turn following the 2019 season. While most juice ball frauds would try to emulate their 2019 power and fail, see Gleyber Torres, Altuve tried to emulate it and succeeded. He went from being the contact machine he was earlier in his career to more of a true blue power hitter. Instead of trying to work against his declining athleticism, Altuve worked with it to maximize his swing potential and age better into his skill set. Now he can put less wear and tear on his legs, as he is simply only required to jog around the bases. Quite beautiful, actually. We don't really discuss the success stories of juice ball merchantry. This happens to be the biggest example in the smallest package. I had a feeling a Rockies player would appear, with their ballpark already residing in the juiced ball era throughout their history. This was Blackmon's final, semi-productive season as far as we know. Many of us could see the writing on the wall. His barrel rates were just mediocre, and his fly ball luck was definitely a product of Coors. I feel really bad now that this is the second appearance Blackmon has made in these types of videos, and both times he's being thrown under the bus. Honestly, I love Charlie Blackmon, but he's made for Coors the same way Kenan Thompson is made for SNL. You take them out of that environment, and their flaws start to become apparent very quickly. Not to say that they are bad at their job though. It's just that, even in their respective industries, there is a very narrow path to their success. But hey, most of us haven't gone as far as they have, so power to them, even if that power is built on smoke and mirrors. Another name all of us expected, another, hey, that really happened, and another Astros player. It's no surprise Bregman ranks close to last in fly ball difference. The Crawford boxes really do hold some magic in them. I mean, you can make a whole compilation of lazy fly balls that become homers and left, even outside the 2019 season. Not to say that the juiced ball messed with him. I think Bregman is smart enough to understand who he is as a player, but the season more so skewed our expectations of what kind of player he was. I mean, a third baseman with excellent fielding, an excellent eye, and can hit 40 plus homers? I mean, we're looking at the Astros' answer to Nolan Arenado, when he's more of a Justin Turner with elite defense. I believe Breggy is a lot of people's examples when pointing out the absurdity of the 2019 season. Like with Kepler and Marte, 2023, as well as 2022 in Bregman's case, is more where he should reside. I will say I'm surprised that his isolated slugging didn't rank lower, but he did run some pretty high ISOs the years before and after, so he caught a break there. But boy oh boy, his barrel rates, fly ball difference, and 50th percentile exit velos look more like Luis Ariza's than Nelson Cruz's, someone who also hit 41 homers that season. In fact, putting their metrics next to each other is kind of hilarious. It's interesting that we have multiple Astros on this list. This team was considered to be one of the best offenses of all time. However, Bregman isn't the biggest fraud on the Astros. That would be Yuli fucking Gurriel. Yuli Gurriel is such a hard player to pinpoint. He showed extreme power while he was in Cuba. Obviously, we weren't expecting those numbers to sustain here, but we've seen our fair share of Cuban sluggers be able to translate their power in the States and make a decent career out of it. In his first 2 full seasons, it seemed as if Gurriel was comfortable being a contact hitter who swung a lot. But then in 2019, that contact started to turn into power. What's even funnier about the season is that he was putting up some of his worst career numbers during the first half. Then he had a July for the ages, resulting in Gurriel being named Player of the Month. The one change he made was to swing at a lot more pitches and to start pulling the ball more. My theory is that Gurriel picked up on how many fly balls being hit towards left that would have been outs in years past, inexplicably turning into home runs. And he decided to swing away for a chance to pull a Crawford box homer, even if he couldn't barrel it. He even did it multiple times during the World Series. And after looking at his spray chart, I think I'm right. You all knew this one was coming. Hell, I did. Alright everyone, I've spent the last 12 hours inputting data, and I decided we're going to find out together who the biggest juice ball fraud of 2019 was. Now, I do want to be on record in saying that I do believe that the biggest juice ball fraud is going to be Brett Gardner. It makes too much sense. One of the most preposterous, out of nowhere seasons we've ever seen. So here we go. I have my results all here, or my data all here. I'm about to sort them to get the results. Was there ever a doubt? Brett Gardner hitting 28 homers in 2019 is possibly one of the funniest things I've ever witnessed. Now, his previous career high was 21, but that came in what many also believe to be another juiced ball season back in 2017. Up to this year, he averaged 11 homers per 162 games in his career. Again, this is not how much he averaged per season, but per 162 games played. He hit 28 in 141 games. There is actually a reality where Brett Gardner is a member of the 30 homer club had he not missed 21 games due to a sore knee and other ailments. The number that stands out the most among everyone on this list is isolated slugging, which is no surprise. Before this season, his previous career high was 166. It was 253 in 2019. Side note, I'm shocked how little the ISO difference factored into these rankings. It's not that I weighed it less than the other metrics, it's just most of the players who faltered in this category had the other numbers to back their performance up. The only other player to be in the bottom 10 in ISO difference to make the list is Ketel Marte. I mean, hell, Christian Yelich ranked last in ISO difference, but had the barrel rate and best exit velo to make you think this was a legitimate campaign that would have existed even with a normal ball. One of my favorite examples of data telling a story is this one. As the season went on, it seemed Gardner, like Gurriel, noticed the fly balls to be more rewarding than in years past. He made a mechanical change to fit, and had his best month in September despite posting his worst exit velos while his launch angle went straight to the moon. Gardner may have thought he fooled the world, but he didn't fool us. We see your tricks. We see your pathetic barrel rates, your pedestrian exit velos, your garden homers, your pitiful best exit velos, and your imposter isolated slugging. You think a slap hitter like you with middling power could just hit 28 home runs this season and the world wouldn't blink? I know your tricks, Brett. I've been studying them my whole life, and now I finally got you where I want you. Wait 1 second, somebody's calling me. Hello? So that's it? I can't say anything else? Well, it seems like I was just served a cease and desist by Brett Gardner's attorney. I'll leave my feelings there. But this doesn't mean our business is through, Brett. And there you have it, the biggest frauds of the juiced ball season. Did a player you expect make the list? Who did you think would be on who didn't appear? I want to know your thoughts. Comment a player's name and I'll tell you where they ranked on my list. And while you're down there participating in healthy discourse, I'll be watching you guys. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also want to give a huge shout out to Twitter users Juggerbear as well as Addison, Yankee World Addison, for correctly predicting that Brett Gardner would be the biggest juice ball fraud of 2019. Congratulations, you guys know ball.